Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel, continuing the Swamp Thing read-along with Swamp Thing Annual number 2. This is the continuation of the main story arc for Swamp Thing. This is important to the canon of the character and Alan Moore's run, which is why we're not skipping it. We're not going to go straight to issue 33 because vital stuff happens in here. It is really like the actual conclusion to the Arcane trilogy. It's kind of just like the special 4th issue of that trilogy. And it is once again drawn by Stephen Bissette. He did not draw the previous issue, and the next 2 issues are also fill-in artists because he was busy working on this issue. Because this is, I think, maybe one of his masterpieces. It's an unbelievable comic. It's really fantastic. Alan Moore's script is great as well. If you're one of them key collectors and you're using that app, you'll recognize this comic as I think they call it the unofficial first cameo of the Justice League Dark, which is it's just key collector making keys out of nothing. I mean, it's just a bunch of characters just characters from DC mythology that happen to be in the same book. There's no team up. There's no reference to Justice League Dark. It's just they feature the characters. It's so stupid. But anyway, really nice book for its story, not for its value as a key. Let's open it up and let's get started here. And right off the bat, Alan Moore is waxing poetic, going really hard on the prose here, and he put a lot of work into it. So I'll read it out for you. We'll give him that. There are people, there are stories. The people think they shape the stories, but the reverse is often closer to the truth. Stories shape the world. They exist independently of people, and in places quite devoid of man, there may yet be mythologies. The glaciers have their legends. The ocean bed entertains its own romances. Even here, even within these chill and perished thickets that know no witnesses save the sleeping toads, each curled like a gorgeous alien fetus beneath its stone, there are stories even here. Stories that grow as blighted trees into a tormented puzzle. Frictions that become overripe and fester on the vine. The stories here have blossomed into deformities, nurtured by a curious soil. There are heroes, there are wicked uncles and princesses, but the drama is askew. The fairy tale contorts into a tragedy. The hero, slow and massive, comes too late. The wicked uncle's passing achieves nothing, and the princess finds no cliché in the fate that's worse than death. Now, I should have led this with this off top. If you haven't watched the previous episodes or you haven't read the Arcane trilogy, you're going to be lost here. So go back, watch those episodes, or go read that. But Abby Arcane right now is kind of in a state worse than death. Her soul has been damned to hell, but her body is still technically alive. She was damned by her uncle Anton Arcane, who was also defeated by Swamp Thing. Well, technically defeated by Matt Cable in the previous issue. And Swamp Thing was too late, too slow in getting to her to rescue her. So he's got her body laid out in the swamp here. And we get the title page, Down Amongst the Dead Men. And just remember just kind of this page layout, because we're going to revisit it in just a moment, this panel layout. And Swamp Thing is lamenting that, he's not able to save her because she's gone somewhere that he can't follow. You have been cast into regions where the wearing of flesh is prescribed, and I am shackled to this body. And he has this realization where he just goes, wait, no, I'm not. Because he remembers that, at the beginning of Alan Moore's story, turn as storyteller on Swamp Thing, Swamp Thing just laid in the swamp and let his consciousness kind of seep out into it for a while. Like, he just lost himself in the green. And he's realizing that, oh yeah, I can do that again. Maybe I could do that even more. Maybe I can go beyond death. And so he lays down next to Abby, and then we revisit that panel layout where we have beneath her here all of these roots, and that's important because we remember from those initial issues that it's through the roots, through the greenery, that Swamp Thing can spread out his subconscious. So now he lays out on that hill, and his body drops off, and that's him going into those roots and spreading out beneath. And he feels initially a pull to do what he did in those initial issues, which was lose himself there. But he realizes, I can't do that. I must stay on task. I must find Abby. And he ends up in this weird place that's just kind of miasma of color, and meets a woman who is looking for her son, Jerry. And she says that they were driving, she was pulling out of the intersection, she turned around to tell him to shut up, and now suddenly she's here, but she can't find her son. And on the page turn, her son does show up, and he says, "I'm sorry, Mom, I couldn't follow, not right away, but I'm here now, we can go where we're supposed to." And the mom says, "Jerry, do you know this place?" And he says, "Oh, sure, it's not been so long since I was here last time. Come on, there's lights up ahead." And Swamp Thing tries to call them back, and another figure tells them, they're not coming back. Save your breath. And it is Deadman, Boston Brand, who is a really cool character. He's if you're not familiar with him, he is dead. He was a circus performer who was killed while performing. Came back as the spirit. He can possess people's bodies, and just act through them. And he explains that they're in the realm of the just dead, and that mother and son, they were in a car accident. She was killed right away. The son took a little while longer to die. So this is a story very much steeped in the afterlife, steeped in what happens beyond that threshold. And I love this moment with the mother and son, where he says it hasn't been so long since I was here last. It's that idea that we all, we came from this place and we return to this place when we go. It's very sweet, optimistic. And Swamp Thing explains the situation to Deadman, that Abby was damned wrongly. She doesn't belong here. So Deadman decides he's going to help guide him, towards where he possibly has to go, or where they might find Abby at this time. They walk by these poltergeists, and that are made of ectoplasm. So some creativity, there's a lot of just like weird little critters and creatures sprinkled throughout this book that Stephen Bissette gets to have a fun time with, and the colorist Tatiana Wood, because this is a very abstract panel. If we could just take a moment to look at this, like, there's not a ton of holding lines here. So I imagine the pencils here were just kind of vaguely outlined. Todd Albin went in, hit those lines where he usually does to give some definition, and then Tatiana Wood comes in with colors. None of these colors have holding lines on them, so she's also just going in, adding squiggles and stuff. I'm sure she's given notes about it, but it's really like a group effort. And just the barest bones representation of character here, where like you could tell that Swamp Thing, you could see that that's Deadman floating next to them, and like, what are they? Like, they're literally just the vaguest outlines of characters. It works. It's such a daring way to draw this and represent this. They move beyond the poltergeists, and they end up at this bright shining light. And the Deadman says, "This is where I leave you. I can't continue. You have to go alone into the presence of God. Don't worry about it. She's always treated me okay." Swamp Thing is surprised that to hear a feminine pronoun. He says she for God. Deadman says, "Yeah, as far as I understand, there's a woman running things. Her name's Rama Kushna. She brought me back. She gave me this life." And as Swamp Thing departs from Deadman, he's greeted by another friend, or rather a stranger, the Phantom Stranger, another one of those mysterious characters from DC lore. So the Phantom Stranger becomes Swamp Thing's new guide. He explains that he saw the defeated Anton Arcane plunge through this region on his way to hell. We get that depicted in the side here. He knew when he saw that, he knew that that wasn't the end of the matter, that something else would be coming to follow. And sure enough, here Swamp Thing is. And so they move off towards their meeting with God. A nice landscape image here, very pretty. Swamp Thing asks, "Is this heaven?" The Phantom Stranger replies, "It is an aspect of heaven. Heaven has many semblances, as there are creeds, as there are souls." And who do they bump into in this aspect of heaven but Alec Holland? And we get a really nice moment where Swamp Thing and Alec kind of get to really have a conversation where Alec thanks Swamp Thing for burying him in that burial issue number 28, and he talks about how he was kind of stuck with his spirit like roaming Earth before that because he suffered a violent death and he couldn't he couldn't move on to rest, but now he's here thanks to Swamp Thing, and he's here with Linda, and we see her in the distance. Alec asks Swamp Thing if he would like to go say hi, and even though it's just a close-up of an eye, you can kind of see that, like, I don't know if it's sadness or contentment that he was never Alec Holland, but he still remembers the feeling of loving Linda Holland and knowing that she's now at peace and that she's safe here. You kind of get that emotion from this panel. And he opts to not go say hello and just leave it be. So he and the stranger continue on, and as they move on, the color is kind of fading out. They're moving into this darkness until they're nothing but silhouette. And I really wish this was on the page turn. But they're walking through the darkness, and suddenly a light starts to appear. And what is it? It is the eyes of God. And it is the Spectre, another DC character. This is a fantastic page. This is another one of those like jam pages where everybody's doing a little bit of something. Obviously, Bissette's throwing down the pencils, but Toddlebin, crazy good on the inks, filling out this definition. But also, again, Tatiana Wood, there's not a lot of holding lines down here in these outer colors. So she's going in there and she's doing some cool psychedelic stuff. And again, Bissette's drawing in these weird little globs and critters that are just kind of snaking throughout. Fantastic panel, fantastic page. And Spectre asks, who comes here? What are you doing here? Swamp Thing makes his plea. Abby is dead. Abby's soul is condemned wrongly. I want to get her out. Spectre says no, she has to stay. She's been damned. There's nothing that can be done about that. Swamp Thing, furious at this initial response, lets out the big no that breaks out of the word bubble. Frothing at the mouth as the Phantom Stranger tries to hold him back. He explains the Spectre is not someone you can fight. He's well beyond that. And they try to make the appeal, and the Spectre explains that if the woman is condemned, then that is the fate set aside for her. The Stranger replies, but if she is unjustly condemned to hell, then hell has no reason. And if that is so, Spectre, then paradise itself is an empty confection. Spectre replies, perhaps. Yet if things are as you say, then would not her return from death render life itself meaningless? Such things are not allowed, Stranger. And the Stranger replies, no. Then what of Jim Corrigan? Jim Corrigan was the Spectre's mortal form before he was killed, before he took up the mantle of the Spectre, before he became what he is now. This clever response brings great joy to the Spectre. He allows them to pass and continue on their journey. Another fantastic page. Also, check out this little eye, this little star in the Spectre's eye. I think Neil Gaiman was very influenced by this comic in more ways than one. That is going to come back in Sandman in 5 years. But also this opening monologue, I should have mentioned. I think Gaiman was very influenced by about how stories shape the world, because Sandman is the shaper of stories. And he and Moore were good friends. So I think there was definitely some influence here. And they're passing deeper and deeper. They're going towards hell, and you could tell because we're getting some really dark imagery, dead things that are just unidentifiable in the foreground here. Um, and they are approaching the place that can only really be described as hell. I would love to see this in black and white. This is all just inks. Great. I mean, obviously the colors are really good, like the gradient that's laid down here, but just the black and white media that are used to create that, really pretty. Sorry, my light source keeps moving because the sun keeps moving, so I keep having to readjust myself here. But they continue to move on to hell, and now that they're in hell, Swamp Thing needs a new tour guide, someone more familiar with the terrain, and enter Etrigan, the demon. We're familiar with him. He appeared for a trilogy of issues earlier, and he agrees to take Swamp Thing further into hell if the Phantom Stranger will give him the flower on his lapel. He says that he will plant the flower on a hill in hell so that people can look at it and kind of compare their situation, to see something beautiful in hell and then compare it to their own standing while they're being tortured should make it even more torturous for them. So great stuff there. The stranger initially says that Swamp Thing has to enter alone because everyone must enter hell alone or else it can't be called hell. And Etrigan brings him through anyway, together. And the stranger says, no, you can't do that. There are rules. And Etrigan's like, the rules? What? And if I break these rules, pray tell, shall I be punished? Sent perhaps to hell? Oh, that Etrigan. He's so funny. And now we start to get some demons and stuff, some other demons. And Swamp Thing and Etrigan pass by these gross little guys. Muttle Crunch is one of their names. Great name. And I guess Alan Moore starts that trend in DC where the demons have crazy names like that. Because again, Neil Gaiman revisits that in Sandman when he uses hell. And there's the demon Squatterbloat, which is again, great name. love what they come up with for this stuff. But Muddle Crunch is currently in charge of torturing Sunderland, who we might recall from just that very first couple issues. He was the one that was hunting Swamp Thing down, and Swamp Thing absolutely murdered him, just straight up killed him. And Swamp Thing gets to see what he's been condemned to, having his tongue repeatedly ripped out by Muscle Crunch. And Swamp Thing's a little bit horrified. He's got the two hands over his mouth. He's scandalized. And we get here maybe one of Alan Moore's probably favorite pieces, maybe Neil Gaiman's favorite pieces, where Swamp Thing asks the demon, how could God allow such a place as this nightmare that they're walking through? And the demon replies, think you God built this place, wishing man ill and not lusts uncontrolled or swords unsheathed? Not God, my friend. The truth's more hideous still. These halls were carved by men while yet they breathed. God is no parent or policeman grim, dispensing treats or punishments to all. Each soul climbs or descends by its own whim. He mourns, but he cannot prevent their fall. We suffer as we choose. Nothing's amiss. All torments are deserved. None more than this. This idea that hell was created by men rather than God is, I think, something that really stuck with Neil Gaiman, particularly. And while they're walking through, there's another voice calling, Holland, how nice to see you. And it is, sure enough, Anton Arcane. He's on top of this hill. His body's just like, you can't even tell where he ends, where the terrain begins. He's got insect eggs hatching within him. And he says, pretty appropriate, huh? And he explains, oh yeah, you'll find Abby over there, thinking that he wants Swamp Thing to see her torment in hell. He thinks that'll be his ultimate final victory. But as Swamp Thing's walking away, he asks, before you go, how many years have I been here? Swamp Thing tells him, since yesterday. And he gets the little iris on him where he's in a really small voice. Yesterday. Because oh boy, what he must be going through that he completely deserves. But feels like years. It's been a day. Fantastic. They find Abby's body, got her pretty legs sticking out from this gang of demons that are surrounding her. Swamp Thing barges in, screams, "No, get away from her." He stops and he sees the body and recognizes her. And he approaches, he picks her up, and these demons, they were planning to do something, you know. They were trying to, like, you know, torture her in some way, or take her eyes as pendants, take her hair from her, take her ears. And now they're like, "Hey, he pushed us to the side, Rundle Threat. I noticed. What should we do? Peel him and set him to the task and peel him and set him to task in the salt mines, perhaps?" Or Swamp Thing interrupts them. "You have done enough." And he whacks him across the face, pushes his big old snout back into his head, and great, because you could see his lower jaw still out here, but the rest of his head is being pushed back, so it's really the force there is really sold. The violence of the act. And we get another reference to elementals here. The buggers bled my neb. It is some elemental. And that's something that's going to come up in future issues. And Etrigan says, "What are you doing? You're going to try to fight all hell while you're down here? You know, we got to get out of here. Start running." And as they run out, Anton sees that and says, "No, you rescued her? But that was my revenge. That was all I had left in this place. She must stay damned like me." And he tries to chase after them to get them back. And Swamp Thing and Etrigan climbing up, and Etrigan opens up a portal for Swamp Thing to return back to the real world. Another really fun cartoonish image here where this character who got rocked before by Swamp Thing now punches his friend in the face, and we get that like really like silly face inversion where everything's being drawn in. But Swamp Thing is going towards the portal, and Anton Arcane's head is slowly reaching up towards his ankle, towards his Achilles. Takes a big munch on Swamp Thing's leg as he's trying to get out. It doesn't completely stop him, though. He is trying to shake off Arcane, and the Etrigan, the demon Etrigan, comes up, performs my favorite action of the issue, and punts his head, goes boom, up into the stratosphere. Love that panel where it's down, 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 kick, boom, head goes flying. That's hysterical. Swamp Thing himself ascends. But then we get this kind of inversion as he goes to the portal where now he's descending again with Abby's body. And great line from Etrigan as he's wishing them farewell. "Now take her from these stews and frozen lakes. She will remember not what did occur, but if it please her, tell her when she wakes, a flower grows yet in hell that's named for her." From Etrigan planted that flower the random stranger gave him. Swamp Thing awakes back in the swamp, and next to him, Abby is also awake. She asks Alec, "What are we doing out here in the snow?" And then we get this big moment of stillness, and she just says, "You're crying." And that is the conclusion of Swamp Thing Annual number 2. Awesome issue. No wonder Bissette needed some time and help with the fill-in issues before and after this. This was a monster to attack, and he absolutely crushed it. This is a fantastic work. I had forgotten how good this one was. Honestly, it had been a really long time since I read it. I didn't even talk about the cover being so good about Swamp Thing's descent into hell, all his guest stars, but all around really solid issue. This is annual number 2. There is an annual number 1. but it wasn't written by Alan Moore. It was before his time on the series, and it was just an adaptation of the Wes Craven movie. It's honestly, it's fine. It's drawn by Mark Texeira and Tony DeZuniga. It's okay, but it's nothing too impressive. If you want an episode on this, let me know. I'll do it. But annual number 2 is what we talked about today. Next week, we will be going into issue number 33, Pog, one of the strangest issues of Swamp Thing. Really looking forward to that. Let me know if there's anything in this issue that I missed. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. But now, it's time to get back to reading.